Welcome back to Plague of Shadows. Last time we defeated Tinker Knight in his Iron Whale, and this time we're heading to the final third, the final triad of Order of No Quarter stages, starting with Tinker Knight. In my opinion though, I probably shouldn't have gone in this order, because Tinker Knight stage is actually quite a bit harder in this version of the game. Not that the design is different, it's just that the way that Plague Knight plays makes it a bit more difficult than Shovel Knight's version, and also not having as good of a phase locket. Well, at least in this situation, the phase locket being inferior kind of makes for a more difficult stage. Overall though, still not as difficult as the final Order of No Quarter stage that I'm going to be going to. As for Tinker Knight's bio, Tinker Knight, it starts off with that as an exclamation. Some knights love rushing into the glory of battle, ready to crush the skulls of their enemies. Tinker Knight is not one of those knights. He does his fighting before the battle begins, laboring on diabolical devices that do his work for him. The wrench is the tool of his trade, doubling as an engineering device and a melee weapon. Some are quick to dismiss Tinker Knight's lethality, usually just before falling victim to one of his mechanical monstrosities. Pros: gregarious demeanor, hard worker. Cons: rough hands, works long hours, and always out to prove himself. I guess I'd agree with that. Kind of on Tinker Knight. For the knights that are getting their own campaigns, Spectre Knight and Plague Knight I'm cool with, and considering that they're on different sections of the map, like Plague Knight is in the second third and Spectre Knight is in the first third, that's pretty cool. So, you know, I'm fine with that. However, the last knight being King Knight, you know, also being part of technically the initial 3 knights that most people would fight in this game, is pretty lame in my opinion. I'd rather have Tinker Knight as the knight to fight, or not to fight, to play as in the last campaign that we're getting. I don't know, I just like Tinker Knight more. Maybe it's because I'm a fan of like machines and science and stuff like that. Not that I know how to use them at all, I'm just a fan of them. So I guess you could say that Tinker Knight is one of my favorite knights. There is a feat that I miss in this campaign that is really easy to get. It's for staying in the air for 10 seconds without touching the ground. And honestly, you could get it in any stage pretty much. It's not a very difficult feat to get. I just forgot about it, and one day while I was looking through the feats, I was just like, oh, that's a feat that I didn't get that I probably could have. You get it by staying in there for 10 seconds, of course, and the easiest way to do so is, as Plague Knight, of course, to have the float burst on, and basically jump, use your float burst, cancel the float burst, like press down, and then do another float burst while in the air already. So jump, float burst, press down, throw a bomb, hold the button, do a double jump, float burst, and then after that last float burst, just keep spamming bombs, and that'll basically allow you to stay in the air for a lot longer than usual, because when you throw bombs you actually do lag a bit in the air, so getting that would be pretty easy using that method. And also probably do it from a high ledge, like in that last room with the conveyor belts and those big Tinker dudes. You probably could do it very easily there if you start on the conveyor belts, or at least on one of the top ones, and then gently float down the rest of the way. And we kind of skipped past the well, we didn't skip, but I skipped past the Plague Knight specific section because it wasn't anything really to talk about in my opinion. There is a bit of a tricky platforming thing at the well, not at the beginning, but right after the big Tinker shooter guy. There's a Cypher coin kind of above a bed of spikes, but using the vat to get that would pretty much solve your problems very easily. And now we get the Fleet Flask. Kind of like how the Spin Burst is a screw attack, or maybe people think it's, I don't know, a Sonic spin ball attack. The Fleet Flask is kind of like Samus's speed boost. So you just drink it and you'll start running really, really fast going forward. And as you might have seen just then, we plowed right through that enemy without taking any damage. It only does a little bit of damage to enemies. Like, I don't think it does any more than what your bombs are able to do. But it's, you know, it makes you invincible. At least while you're running. You can stop by doing a float burst. You can stop by running into a wall. Or, I think, just turning around will also suffice. So, it's not impossible to stop yourself once you get going, is what I'm trying to say. Although you can double jump while still in it. Like, Plague Knight's first jump will be a little spin jump, and then his second will be his double jump. But he'll keep his momentum, is what I'm trying to say. And that will come into play a bit later. Maybe in this part with a certain extra stage that requires use of your Arcanas. Very possible. Highly possible, 100% happening this part. As for this section as Plague Knight, really, really, really easy. Like, especially with the treasure trappings, just being able to suck money toward you so that you don't have to deal with the platforming as much. It's just such a simple section for something that kind of caused Shovel Knight a little bit of trouble. Although you probably could just phase lock it your way across as Shovel Knight. But the thing is, as Shovel Knight, once you're off of the platform, like by mistake, you're kind of dead. With Plague Knight, considering you have essentially 2 mid-air jumps, you can get a really good distance without needing that platform if you do lag behind. But I didn't lag behind, so that point is kind of moot anyway, as long as you're keeping up with the track, I guess you could call it. It's not exactly what it is. And these dang Tinker Wizards, the projectiles that they shoot, along with the projectiles that these bigger guys shoot, actually take away an entire dot of your health. So that's pretty lame. And considering I don't have all that many actual dots because the game is glitchy or something and won't actually increase my maximum health, it'll just keep it where it is. That means if I do die, then, you know, there might be a problem. Actually, that's not true. If I were to die, I do believe that my health would actually reset in such a way that I'd have the 6 dots that I should have rather than just the 5 that, or the 4 actual dots that I have right now. So maybe dying would be a good thing in the PlayStation 3 version specifically, because I'm not sure how all the other versions handle this, but the 3DS version does it fine. Like, at the end of Treasure Knight stage, yes, it was Treasure Knight, I had all of my dots. Anyway, you saw me just there using the, I think it was the cluster powder to take out that, knight guy. The cluster powder is pretty phenomenal, I noticed as I was playing through the game on my 3DS. It just wrecks a lot of the smaller enemies. It can cause like 3 hits to them, and its radius is pretty big, so they're definitely gonna get hit multiple times if you kind of center your hit, I guess. And I'm going to be using it on the boss of this stage because it's just too dang useful to not use. Especially considering that Tinker Knight does take extra damage, I'll say. For those of you who haven't seen the Shovel Knight version of the game, there's something special going on with this boss fight. Although the cluster powder is not very good for destroying these checkpoints, as you can see. Rather than just taking 2 bombs like it did for the 5 health knight, it takes 5 bombs, each one just taking 1 hit off. And I really like the dialogue here because Plague Knight actually respects Tinker Knight. He sees him as a fellow scientist. You know, Plague Knight's a chemist and Tinker Knight's, I guess, a physicist, maybe? I don't know. But Tinker Knight ain't having none of that, so we gotta kill him. And with the cluster powder, it's made really easy because Tinker Knight takes a full dot of damage every time he's damaged. But then there's the second half of the boss fight, which in my opinion is actually easier as Plague Knight. So the level is easier. No, the level is harder as Plague Knight, but the boss is easier. Especially because these missiles that shoot out actually don't shoot out in the same direction as they did with Shovel Knight. Before, it was one going to the right, or to the left rather, one going straight up, and then one going diagonally up to the right. So if you were shovel dropping on him, it would be made a bit harder. Here they made it easier so that it's one going to the left, one going up left, and one going up right. So if you're just standing on top of that shoulder bit, or rather jumping above that shoulder bit, you won't really take any damage. But that was Tinker Knight done really easily thanks to that cluster powder, taking off like 1.5 or 2 dots of health every time I threw it at his face. Also, you need to throw it at his face. I didn't mention that. But now we have his essence. I kind of bought everything from Mona, so I kind of have to just give my music sheets to Percy and then be on my way. Maybe kill some plague minions on the way there? No? I guess there's none appearing. My game did freeze in this section, only on my 3DS version, but I was kind of testing out what each of the bombs was like hanging out in this area. And for some reason, the game just kind of froze. And now we're in an unavoidable battle with Black Knight here. I don't think it's... That actually might not be true. It is unavoidable no matter which stage you start in, because he's going to block off your way to the next stages if you do Polar Knight first. So yeah, you're forced to take on Black Knight here. And apparently, Black Knight has told Mona that there's something going on between Plague Knight and the Magicist, which, as we know, is not true. But since Plague Knight is such a shy little guy, he doesn't really have the courage, excuse me, to tell Mona how he actually feels. So instead we get to fight Black Knight and completely wreck him with our cluster powder. Well, it only took away a single dot. And of course there's only the 1 bomb per throw kind of thing. Or at least 1 bomb can be on screen at a time. So instead I switched to a different tactic using the sparkler powder, I think it was called. It's electric based, and rather than doing damage with the casing itself, like the other bombs, only the explosion does damage, and as you throw it, there's little sparks that come out of it periodically that can also damage enemies. So you need to mind your distance a lot, but having the impact powder along with it means that as soon as it hits the ground or a wall, it'll explode in its wide radius, dealing a good amount of damage as well. So it's pretty much going to be my boss killer combination from now on. The bounce casing, the sparkler powder, and the impact fuse. And it looks like Mona has gone off somewhere. Just kind of left Team Plague, I guess. I think that is what it's officially called, just Team Plague, which is kind of lame, if I'm going to be honest. But now Percy's our support character, as well as the person we give our music sheets to, so we'll have to deal with him. Although not right now, because we're going to be taking on this Phantom Striker here. And same rules apply as with Shovel Knight. If you... Well, I kind of had a brain fart there. If you take too much damage during the fight, then you won't get as much money. So, you know, try not to take damage Ironically, using the Sparkler Powder against him, considering he's electric based in terms of his abilities. But he also has the ability to summon winds that will push you around. Kind of like, I guess, in a certain stage that we'll be getting to later. But still, it's a bit of an annoying ability. You can't set yourself up as well. I still don't take very much damage though. That Sparkler Powder really does its work. If you can basically hit the floor right underneath the enemy's feet, they're going to be taking 2 hits of damage, so an entire dot will be gone. And also the 2 bombs on screen at once kind of thing. Like, it's the only bomb that has 2 max on screen. But that's not really a problem with the impact fuse, because as soon as it hits the ground, that one is kind of gone. Like, that bomb is gone, and you can throw 2 more right after. That's something I kind of should have gotten into. Plague Knight always has 3 throws in a row, in him at least. So if you press the button 3 times, no matter what kind of bomb you're using, even if it's only 1 fuse, or rather, only allowed 1 on screen due to the fuse, you'll still throw 3 times, so you could still land in the air if you want to. And now, we have this shivering sprint to do, where we abuse the Fleet Flask to its utmost potential by running into walls on icy surfaces. Well, actually, this place isn't icy, it's just snowy. There's some of it that's icy, but only the ceiling, so we can't actually slip on it. And it does make you use the Fleet Flask, not really cleverly, just a lot. And I like the Fleet Flask in this stage, at least. And also in one of the challenges later on, there's one that asks you to use the Fleet Flask to get a ton of money on this big kind of obstacle course thing. And the obstacle course is the purest form of platforming. Well, yeah, that's kind of what I meant to say. That is what I meant to say. It's pure platforming, and I like that. Just having to run all the way to the end without running into anything, so that the spiked wall that's coming up behind us won't actually crush us and kill us. And there it is right there. It was actually going pretty fast. If you don't use the Fleet Flask immediately, you're pretty screwed. And also if you hit a wall, you'll get knocked back a little bit, and that'll also screw you. But we beat it. We get all the money, all the cipher coins, all of the 1 music sheet. So let's head back to the Potionatorium village thing and give this music sheet to Percy. You can't give it to him right here though. If you decide to talk to him, he'll just say, well, depending on if you've bought all the items or not, he'll say like, what do you want to buy, or I have nothing for you, so leave. Not exactly that, he's not that mean, but it's pretty much what happens. If you have something to buy, he'll ask you if you want to buy something. If you don't have anything to buy, then he'll just kind of shoo you away. And I did not mean to actually explode that guy. I didn't explode the guy in front of the Fleet Flask area either. You know, I'm not feeling in a very explode my minions kind of mood. Next time on Plague of Shadows, we'll be taking on Polar Knight.